What's up, guys? The losing streak will not end. I think it's like 17 out of the last 19 days are now losses. It's just completely insane. Small loss last night, 2-2. Memphis Grizzlies, nice easy winner, outright underdog winner. Fresno covered, and they almost had the outright win there at the end. It got a little bit dicey. That was the game where right at the end there, they could have potentially won the game outright, and they also could have potentially not even covered, which was pretty insane, but that one did get there. The market had actually shifted and gone against me on the Michigan State game, and that one wound up being a loser, which I was kind of surprised that Michigan State played as well as they did in that spot, and surprised that the market signaled against Penn State there. That was just a little bit weird to me, and then the market did seem to wind up in agreement with me on the Oregon State one, and that one was the worst one of all of them. That one just didn't get there, not even close. I mean, Oregon State kind of, I guess, look ahead to Oregon, but I don't see how that compares to the how bad the situation was that Arizona State was in. So, well, we move on from that, and just to piss me off even further, the leans that I gave out that I didn't actually play almost all got there in college basketball, except I think Robert Morris didn't, but Northern Kentucky did, Murray State did, Auburn certainly did. Oh man, I just hate that. When you just kind of weigh the strength of the leans that you have a little bit differently than maybe you should. I mean, it at least kind of validates that my thinking is still right on a lot of these games. But we move on to today. We got a packed card today, man. College basketball is a really packed card today. I am on 4 games here, and it looks like the market is kind of signaling an agreement with me already, even though I don't see the percentages on these. It looks like it's kind of moving in my direction on all of these. First play, East Carolina -1. It's actually up to 1.5 in a lot of spots. You can get 1.5 or 2 now, it looks like. Not much of a difference, obviously, between 1.5. Once it gets to the 2, you're laying a bucket. Maybe it gets a little dicey there. What does KenPom have this at? Just so I know. KenPom seemed to be in agreement with a lot of these. KenPom's only got this at 1, but I think that's fine for this one. The spot for Wichita State is awful. So this is actually, the line is actually flipped here from East Carolina being a 1-point dog, it looks like, to a 2-point favorite and going through the 2. So it does look like it's certainly moving in my direction here. So I think this is one that you would need to get on before the line gets too, out of control here on East Carolina. It's a horrible spot for Wichita. I mean, they're coming, I think it's kind of a sandwich spot. And of course, there is a revenge angle here that actually goes against them. But as I keep pointing out, I think revenge is stronger in certain aspects, but I think in other cases it tends to be a little bit overstated, although in this one, Wichita did lose at home to East Carolina, so it is kind of a road reversal revenge angle in season, which is a little bit stronger in these second meetings of conference teams when a team lost, as I assume Wichita State was a favorite in that one at home, right? Yeah, by 2.5. When a team loses at home on their own floor, then they go out on the road to face that team again, it does tend to motivate them a little bit, but in this spot, I think this spot is really bad for Wichita, because Wichita, I mean, they kind of know they're not going anywhere this year, but the game that they're coming off of was kind of game of the year type stuff. They were beating FAU throughout the early portions of that game, wound up losing the lead and then coming all the way back again. Well, I mean, they were only down by 8 or 9, I think, at the most, so they were never really out of it. They came all the way back. First, this is at home for Wichita against FAU's the ranked team, the best team in the conference. I don't care if South Florida is ahead of them. South Florida is not a good team at all. FAU, clearly the best team in the American Athletic. They made the Final Four last year, so that was a big game for Wichita. And Wichita gave them all they could handle, even though the final score looks like Wichita didn't even come close. They lost by 13, but that game was in overtime, man. Wichita completely lost it in overtime. The game got a little out of hand in overtime. Wichita just kind of ran out of steam there, but that was a game they played real close, and they came back in the second half to tie it, to send it into overtime. Tough battle. Now they have to go out on the road to East Carolina, and after this they have Charlotte, who is in 3rd place in the conference right now, so another kind of big game there for Wichita. Wichita actually played FAU pretty close both times this year and lost both times, but I don't know what they're going to have left in the tank, man. Even though, yeah, they are facing an East Carolina team that did beat them on their own floor. Not every revenge angle gets there, like I said. And it looks like the market's kind of agreeing with me on East Carolina here. I just think it's a really bad, like, hangover type spot for Wichita coming off that tough game against FAU where they took the best team in the conference into overtime. East Carolina, I like how the spot sets up better for them because they don't have this game really surrounded by anything very important with Tulane up next. And they're coming off 2 straight road games where they had actually lost 2 games in a row at home to South Florida and then on the road to Charlotte. And even though I just said South Florida is not very good, at least certainly nowhere near as good as their record indicates, they're still one of the better teams in the conference at least. So no shame in losing to them really for East Carolina. And then going on the road to Charlotte, not an easy task there either. They went out on the road for a second straight game after that and were able to beat UTSA, who was one of the worst teams in the conference. But I think that that's kind of a new momentum starter there. So that win for East Carolina, when you beat a team that's not very good, it at least helps you regain some confidence and start some new momentum going into the next game. So I like that aspect of it. So I think that breaks East Carolina's loss streak and gives them some positive momentum coming back home, heading into this game. So I like that aspect of it as well. So I think East Carolina is in the much more positive spot here to refocus a bit here. Wichita in a really bad hangover spot off of the FAU game. So East Carolina, I like them. -1 is what I got in that one. I'm also laying the points with Albany, -7.5 in going over to the American East Conference here for this one. It looks like this line's gone up from 7 to 7.5 here. I think this is just a game nobody's really going to be paying attention to. Ken Palm, I think, has this game at around 8. But people might look at this and think, this is kind of a team between, if the recreational bettors even look at this at all, they might think it's just a game between 2 bad teams in this conference. Really, both teams have bad records. Albany's only a half game ahead of NJIT, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, who was their opponent here and who I'm fading here. Albany only a half game ahead of them in the conference, but their overall record is a bit better, 3.5 games better or so. But even so, I think people might look at this and see, well, wait a minute, Albany's lost 3 games in a row, and look and see, Albany just got absolutely killed by Vermont in one of those games. So that doesn't look good. They gave up over 100 points to UMBC in the next game, losing that one too, and then they lost to Binghamton in their last game, who's also one of the worst teams in the conference. So they lost to 2 of the worst 3 teams in the conference. And now they face the other of the 3 teams that are below them in the conference here. People are going to potentially look at that and say, well, wait a minute, they can't beat anybody. They got crushed by Vermont, who NJIT just beat. So there's that syllogism aspect of it, who I'm going to get into how big of a letdown spot I think this is for NJIT in a minute. But people are going to do that syllogism thing and say, well, wait a minute, NJIT just beat Vermont. Vermont absolutely blasted Albany 81-59. So, how is Albany laying this many points? And they're going to say Albany still has a pretty bad record, even though it's slightly better than NJIT's. And then after that, the Vermont game, Albany gave up 114 points to the worst team in the conference, UMBC. And they also lost to Binghamton after that, who's also one of the worst teams in the conference. So how are they going to cover a huge number when they've been playing total ass? They've lost 6 of their last 7 games. It's what are we talking about here? How are you laying 7.5 points here up against NJIT, who is coming off 2 big wins in a row? NJIT did beat UMBC as well 2 games prior to these last 2 wins that they had. So there's that aspect of it too, where they beat UMBC on the road, and UMBC just put up 114 against Albany and beat Albany by double digits. So none of this from the recreational better standpoint is really going to look like anything that they're going to want to do here as far as taking Albany here. And then, of course, the main reason why I'm going to fade NJIT here is in their last 2 games, they beat Vermont, which I just said. Both of these games are at home for NJIT, by the way. They beat Vermont, who's the best team in the American East. And then coming off that, they also, they didn't suffer a letdown, and they beat UMass Lowell as well. So they pulled off back-to-back big upsets against Vermont as a 13.5-point underdog, and then against Lowell as a 9.5-point underdog. And they pretty much dominated that game and had the lead the entire game. So it's this is crazy. Coming off those 2 wins, they got to be feeling way high on themselves, even though this, again, could be seen as me going against a revenge angle here, because NJIT actually lost on their own floor to Albany early in the season. NJIT Prior to these 2 wins against Vermont and Lowell, they only had 1 win in the conference. Besides that, and it was the win against UMBC. So before that, they had lost every conference game. They lost 5 conference games to start conference play. Then they finally beat UMBC, the game that I just mentioned. Lost to Binghamton, which is not a good loss. Both of these teams, as I mentioned, just lost to Binghamton. Then they beat the top 2 teams in the conference, basically pulling off like pretty much double-digit upsets at home in both games. Like kind of like types of games where you're gonna like storm the court. I don't know if they did, because I don't even know if they draw like a crowd at NJIT because they suck so bad. But maybe for these big games against the bigger teams in the conference, they do. So they basically just pulled off wins against the 2 best teams in the conference. No offense to Bryant, but I do think UMass Lowell is a little bit better than Bryant. I would have to look at the power ratings again. I think so. Now coming up that, they have to go on the road to Albany, and even though Albany did beat them on their own floor, so maybe that will motivate them a little bit, but they're coming off such monster upsets in 2 straight games. I don't see how they're going to be totally focused here. I think this is a letdown spot. I like it for Albany, and the line, like to the recreational better, looking at the team's recent play here, they're going to want nothing to do with Albany here, and laying a bunch of points, it's going to look really suspicious to them. Like, how could they possibly be laying this many points? Don't overreact to recency. Albany is still the better team here. As the rankings tell you, Albany should be around an 8-point favorite in this one. So I'm going to do it. I'm just going to lay the points with Albany. I expect kind of a regression back to the mean here for both teams here, because I think Albany's not really as bad as their recent play makes it look. And NJIT played out of their minds in those last 2 games, but they're really not that good. So Albany minus 7.5. Letdown spot for NJIT there. And like the line, as I said, just looks a little suspect. Got to keep going here, man. I got a ton of plays here. This is getting wild. This is getting crazy. UT-Arlington minus 5. This is one where I think Ken Baum only has this at 4 maybe or something like that. This is up from 4.5 to 5. So I'm ducking the Ken Baum, or bucking the Ken Baum ratings a little bit in this one, I think, with UT-Arlington. He's got them actually only winning by 3 here, but I like the spot a lot better for Arlington here. I think it's a sandwich spot for Tarleton State, who I think Tarleton State, very overrated here. You look at their records, people are going to look at this and think, how am I having to lay like multiple baskets here, lay 4.5, 5 points with UT-Arlington against Tarleton State, when Tarleton State is like 5 games better than UT-Arlington is. Like, what's going on here? How is UT-Arlington laying a bunch of points? I think that it's, as the power ratings are telling you, UT-Arlington is actually the better team here. I think they did face a bit tougher of an out-of-conference schedule here. They faced Arizona, New Mexico, some pretty good teams in here. Texas Tech, North Texas isn't bad either. So they faced a pretty grinding out-of-conference schedule. So UT-Arlington, even though they are 3 games behind Tarleton State in the conference and 5 games behind them overall, I think they faced a much more difficult out-of-conference schedule. Looking at Tarleton State, they faced a lot of cupcakes there in that out-of-conference schedule. I mean, they did face Tennessee, got destroyed by them, but that was kind of the biggest out-of-conference game they had. They did face Grand Canyon as well, I guess. Or no, Grand Canyon's in their conference. What am I saying? And they got crushed by Grand Canyon, by the way. Yeah, so I think people are going to look at this and just like not want anything to do with this. But UT-Arlington, they did lose at Tarleton State as well by 2 in the first matchup. So is this going to be a little bit of a revenge motivator? I don't know, maybe, because UT-Arlington actually covered the spread in that one. Tarleton was actually a 4.5 point favorite in that one, which, I mean, this line looks a little bit too high based on that. Like, it looks like it probably should be around 3, but Ken Baum does have these teams right about even ranking-wise, and he has them about around a 3-point favorite here. But I think the spot kind of dictates Arlington being favored by a little bit more here. I think the spot's really bad for Tarleton, and I think the number, like I said, looks suspect when you have a team with a much worse record laying points here. Something's up, and the power ratings are just telling you that UT-Arlington, even though Ken Baum has them as a slightly worse team, the odds makers are kind of telling you they're the slightly better team, at least especially in this spot here. Arlington isn't exactly in the best spot, I guess. They're coming off a couple tough games. They played Cal Baptist, who's in third in the conference right now, to 1 point on the road. Then they turn around and they beat Stephen F. Austin, who's in fourth in the conference. Stephen F. Austin, pretty decent team. And UT-Arlington beat them at home in overtime. So they're coming off a pretty nice win there. But I don't think they're going to overlook Tarleton when Tarleton beat them once already. And Tarleton is in second in the conference right now. And I think the spot is way worse for Tarleton. So, yeah, Arlington did beat Stephen F. Austin, which is a nice win in the previous game. But Arlington was actually a 3.5-point favorite in that game. So they should have won because they were the favorite, and they did. They won. They covered. That's fine. It's a decent win, but now they got Tarleton, who's in second in the conference. So I think it's going to cause them to not overlook Tarleton here. And like I said, the other aspect of it I like is that the line just looks a little bit suspicious here. And Tarleton, they also beat Stephen F. Austin not that long ago. They've run off a nice streak of wins here, but during the streak of wins, they beat Albany Christian, who's been playing really bad and has fallen to second from the bottom in the conference. They haven't been good. They beat Utah Tech, who's not a very good team either. They beat Utah Valley, I didn't mention Utah Valley. Utah Valley is kind of near the bottom of the conference as well. And they beat Stephen F. Austin. That's a decent win, I guess. And they had another win against Albany Christian in there, and UT Rio Grande, who's the worst team in the conference, record-wise at least, and a loss to Southern Utah mixed in there. Southern Utah also near the bottom of the conference. So they played a lot of the worst teams in the conference kind of in that run there after they got blasted by Grand Canyon and lost to Cal Baptist to start out a conference play after beating UT-Arlington. So they haven't done as well against some of the better teams in the conference until in their most recent game. They went into Seattle, and this was a second straight road game, and they beat Seattle, which was actually an upset. Even though Tarleton has the better record, Seattle was a 7.5-point favorite, and they beat Seattle outright. That's a big win. And they have Grand Canyon and Cal Baptist up next. So are they really going to totally pay attention to UT-Arlington here is kind of in the middle of the pack in the conference, and it's a third straight road game. It's a team in UT-Arlington that they already beat once, and it's sandwiched in between Seattle and Grand Canyon and Cal Baptist, who are like all the other like best teams, top teams in the conference along with Tarleton here. So I think it's a sandwich spot. I don't like the spot at all. They have Grand Canyon coming up, although it's not for another week. They don't play Saturday, I guess, so they only play in the midweek next week. But even so, a third straight road game against a team you already beat, coming off a big upset against Seattle, which is kind of misleading that was an upset. So Seattle is actually the better team power ratings-wise over Tarleton. Tarleton's been overperforming based on what their power ratings actually say here. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to lay the points with UT-Arlington, which you can get at like -5 right now. I think they're in the better spot here. I think it's a bad spot for Tarleton. I think it's a sandwich spot here. And maybe a little bit of the revenge angle coming in there. And it's a line that just looks suspect, where the line is telling you that Tarleton is not really actually the better team here. So I think it'll be a little bit tough for them to have to go into UT-Arlington. So I like UT-Arlington there. And UT-Arlington, they play a really, really fast tempo as well. Fast tempo team. I don't know what Tarleton's tempo is. Let me look. Let me see. Tarleton plays a much, much slower tempo at 290 in the country. And KenPom actually has them ranked as the second luckiest team in the country. So that's telling you something right there. That tells you that their record looks way too good. The record makes it look like they're a lot better than they are. They're the second luckiest team in the country. Arlington, 165th in luck, so kind of middle of the pack there. Arlington plays one of the fastest paces, though, at 33, where Tarleton all the way down at 290. So Tarleton wants to slow the pace down. UT-Arlington wants to speed it up. So I think UT-Arlington might be able to control the pace in this one because they'll be at home. So there's this pacing clash here, too. So if Arlington is able to control the pace, I think it'll throw Tarleton out of their comfort zone, and it being a faster paced game actually kind of helps the favorite to cover like a larger spread there too. So I like that aspect of it too. So I like Arlington in that one. So I'm doing that. And then finally, Cal State Fullerton -2. This line looks like it's moving in my direction too. I don't know if I mentioned, Arlington is up from 4.5 to 5, by the way. So that one's looking to go in my direction. Fullerton actually looks like it's gone down actually from -2 to -1. Hang on, can we get it at -1 right now? No, I don't know what pregame's talking about here. Pregame is saying that it's down to 1. I don't see that. I see 2 everywhere, and I see some 1.5s with juice. So I don't know what pregame is showing here, but it looks like Fullerton 2 is kind of the number everywhere. KenPom actually has this at 4, I think. So I don't know if there are injuries coming into play. I don't follow the Big West, really, conference here, so I don't know what's going on here, but I think it's a bad spot. I think the number's a little bit short here for Fullerton because, as the line is telling you, KenPom has this line at 4. He's got Fullerton, winning this game by 4, and he has Fullerton as a slightly better team over Riverside, but the odds makers are kind of telling you the opposite. So I don't know, maybe there are injuries coming into play here because the odds makers are trying to tell you that Riverside is actually the slightly better team, or maybe they just think that they can't get away with making Fullerton the favorite, but Fullerton actually has the slightly better record, I think, than Riverside. So I don't know what's going on with that, really. But let me see here. Fullerton, Riverside. As far as this one, I think both of these teams actually kind of play slower tempo, so there isn't really that much of a tempo collision here. They both kind of play slower paced games here, so this one, teams that play similar style here, but I think it's a bad spot for Riverside. Riverside just pulled off their big win of the year, man. They just beat UC Irvine, who's the top team in the conference. Irvine only had one other loss in the conference this year, I think, which was, to UC San Diego, maybe. Riverside just beat Irvine in their house, and now they have to go out on the road to Fullerton, which they have not played yet this year. Their second matchup isn't until near the very end of the season in the second to last game on March 7th. So they have to go to Fullerton now on the road after a big win over UC Irvine. Pretty much the biggest win of the season, beating the top team in the conference. That's a big win. I don't think they have a bigger win on the season, really. I mean, they beat Green Bay, I guess, who's the top team in the horizon, but I think the win over Irvine is bigger. Irvine's a better team than Green Bay, and they're the top team in this conference. Huge win for UC Riverside there. I don't know if they stormed the court or what there, but that's a big win. Now they have to go to Fullerton, who's one of the only teams below them in the conference. And they have UC Davis on deck, who's in second in the conference here. So this is a sandwich spot, man. Sandwich between the teams that are in the top 2 positions in the conference and may actually be the top 2 teams in the conference. Maybe San Diego gets in the mix there too, but got to be a sandwich spot. It's a letdown spot coming off the huge win over Irvine. And with San Diego up next, they have to go to Cal State Fullerton. I think it's going to be a bit of a tough spot there in Fullerton. They're coming back home after 2 straight losses on the road, and their most recent loss in a second straight road game was to Cal State Bakersfield, who's in 4th to last in the conference. So that's not a great loss there. It was also revenge for Bakersfield, kind of because Fullerton had beaten them in Fullerton. So Fullerton went into Bakersfield, lost the game, didn't play well, really. Although Fullerton did have the lead at some points in the second half. Kind of an ugly loss. They're losing to one of the other bad teams in the conference. So I think that'll maybe refocus them a little bit coming into this game against Riverside. Whereas, because Fullerton's coming off back-to-back losses and had an ugly one in their last loss. So they're coming off a loss. So they're in a spot where I think they're going to have a tendency to refocus more, whereas Riverside in a huge letdown spot and a sandwich spot coming off the big win over Irvine, where they actually wound up winning by 10, and they actually took a big lead. They had a big lead for most of that game, really, so that's a big win. They might be feeling a bit too high on themselves, and they have UC Davis up next, and UC San Diego after that, too, so this game just kind of thrown in there, sandwiched in between the top 3 teams in the conference, so I think it's a bad spot there, too, so Cal State Fullerton -2, we're on that one, too. I'm getting crazy, man. We're going insane here. Going over to the NBA, we have only 3 games today as we head into the All-Star break. I'm going to buck what I see in the market right now, go against the Golden State Warriors. Both of these teams actually played last night, with the Warriors having, I believe, a much tougher game than the Jazz did. Warriors up from 1 to 1.5, going through the 1.5 with juice now on the road. 68% of the cash, but only 51% of the tickets. So it does look like the Warriors have the cash discrepancy and the the line is moving in their direction, but I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case. I expect them to wind up being kind of the public team here because based on their recent play and just their name, like alone, what like public bettor is going to want to take the Utah Jazz here rather than the Golden State Warriors? Jazz have been playing really bad recently. They've fallen to 3 games below 500, basically. Warriors sitting at 500. And the Warriors, of course, have the star power and the name recognition there. So recreational bettors are not going to want to be on Utah here. And as is going to factor into my play here, 2 games ago, they just saw Golden State go in and beat Utah. So they're not going to want to have anything to do with Utah in this game, I wouldn't think. So I kind of expect these numbers that I see in the marketplace to kind of turn around a little bit. But Golden State, both these teams played last night. Golden State went into Utah, beat Utah in what I thought was a bad spot in the game prior to last night's game. And the game was kind of close for a little while. Utah was kind of hanging in there, but they did trail for the entire second half and just kind of trailed off and lost. So fairly easy win for Golden State there. And then after that, they had to come back out of elevation, play back at home at Golden State in the Bay Area against the Clippers, one of the best teams in the NBA at this point. And Golden State had the lead deep into the second half in that game. They were winning by 11 in the fourth quarter, winning by double digits, and they lost the lead and they wound up losing the game at the end. Making another final comeback near the end there, getting back within the game at the end there and falling just short against the Clippers. I don't know if Golden State's going to have much left. Now this being their final game going into the All-Star break. Coming off that huge game against the Clippers where they had the game in their grasp and fell just short. I think this has got to be a flat spot for Golden State. Playing a repeat of a game that they just won the game before that, too. It's got to be a bad spot for Golden State here, man. Utah also played last night, and they haven't had to travel, whereas Golden State had to travel from Utah back to the Bay Area. Now they have to go back into Utah again. So traveling between all these games with no time off, that's a lot worse than Utah, who's just staying at home for this whole stretch. And Utah gets the Warriors again, and it sets up a little bit of a zigzag, a little bit of revenge, because they just played this game 2 games ago, and the Warriors won easily. So that's going to also have nobody wanting to take the Jazz here. And the Jazz played yesterday, still remaining at home, and they lost to the LA Lakers. And they were playing pretty competitively for a bit into the third quarter there, but then just kind of just fell off and drifted off and wound up losing by 16 in the end to the LA Lakers. Not a good performance out of the Jazz, really. So I think the Jazz are going to be in a focus spot here, man. They're not going to want to go into the All-Star break on a bad note, I wouldn't think. I mean, you got Golden State coming into your house again, who just beat you in your own house. I think you're going to show up focused, whereas Golden State, I think they put all their energy into last night's game against the LA Clippers, only to fall just short. I don't know if they're going to have that much left in the tank. They might be looking forward to the All-Star break at this point, even though they probably don't want to go into the All-Star break at a below 500 record either, but even so, I think Utah, they're going to be more motivated to want to get a win out of this here. They have not been playing like uncompetitively, so I don't think they're just throwing in the towel here. And when it's the Warriors and the Warriors just beat you, I think you're going to be focused here. So I like it. And the zigzag situation, because this game just happened, where the line in the game that just happened, I think was Utah +1 or 1.5, and now we're getting a little bit more value in the line here with Utah, probably because of the recency and what we just saw. We just saw the Warriors win this same matchup 2 games ago, and we just saw the Warriors play really well against the Clippers, whereas we just saw the Jazz not look very good against the Lakers last night. So that's going to move this line a little bit further up and give us a little bit more value on the Jazz. I think you can get Jazz +2 in this one. I don't know if even it'll go up a little higher than that, maybe even potentially. So I like the Utah Jazz here for all those reasons. Pretty much in a similar situation to the last game, but this time I think it's a little bit worse for Golden State. They've played too many tough games in a row here. They have way more travel than the Jazz do here, having to go back and forth in and out of elevation. That's got to take its toll. Combined with last night's big performance against the Clippers, I don't like it at all for the Warriors. So Utah Jazz +2. And then over in the NHL, 2 plays in the NHL, and one of them it seems like I'm going against the market, which I don't like, but we'll see what happens with this one. Playing 2 underdogs here, and one is a bit of a sizable underdog, so hopefully I will be able to get something out of this. But the other one that I'm going to be on is on the Nashville Predators, but as it looks right now, Dallas, they're hosting Dallas. Dallas is public, but the line has moved up a little bit from minus 130 to minus 133. So it looks like the market is kind of indicating against Nashville here slightly. Dallas, 88% of the tickets, but only 83% of the cash. So they are the very public team. Maybe we'll see the cash discrepancy shift a little bit so that it's more on the Nashville side, because I don't know if it'll stay on the Dallas side or if this line will continue to go up. I don't know, but you can get this at around Nashville plus 115 right now is a decent home underdog price, which I like. I don't like the spot that Dallas is in at all here. I think it's a sandwich spot for Dallas, really. I think this is their in this stretch of games they have here, this is the one opponent that they might overlook in this stretch of like 4 or 5 games that they have going on here. They've played well since coming out of the break, only losing 1 game since coming out of the break, and they were on the road for most of it. In their prior game 2 days ago on Tuesday, they came home, and they actually had 2 days off coming into that game, coming home from the 3-game road trip that they had to start the second half of the season or whatever after the All-Star break. They went on the road, won at Buffalo, lost at Toronto by 1, tough game there, and then won at Montreal. Not very impressive winning at Montreal, but then they came back home. They had an extra day off to kind of dodge those return home distractions there, even though they didn't have that much time at home because they have to go back out on the road for this one single game, which is kind of a weird situation. But in the return home, they were able to stay focused and win against a good Carolina team. So that's a good win for Dallas there. Now they have to go out on the road again to Nashville, although that's not much travel. But even so, you do still have to go out on the road for this one weird isolated game when you just got comfortable back at home and you just pulled off a big win over Carolina. You have to go out to Nashville, and then after this on Saturday, you come back home and you have to face Edmonton, who was one of the hottest teams in the country going into the All-Star break, and they're still a very good team and pretty hot still, so that's a big game. Edmonton has a much better record than Nashville. Carolina has a much better record than Nashville, and after Edmonton, they face Boston and the Rangers going out on the road as well, so a couple big games there too. So this game is sandwiched in between bigger opponents, man. Carolina, Edmonton, Boston, and the Rangers all coming up on the slate here, and this Nashville game is just kind of tossed in there, sandwiched in there between them. I think it's a bad spot for Dallas there. Nashville, they might overlook them. And I don't know who's going to be in net for Nashville, but I always point out that Saros, pretty good goalie, man. He's one of the better goalies in the league, even though maybe they haven't done quite as well with him this year. But even so, I do like him, so I don't know if he's going to be in net or not today. But Nashville also has 1 day off, but they're not traveling. They're staying at home, and in their previous game, they lost. They've only played 2 games since coming out of the All-Star break, so they are the more rested team as well, and they had a nice break between the two, too. So they didn't play any games before this. They played 2 fewer games, I think, coming out of the All-Star break than Dallas has. So they're in a better rest spot here for sure. They had more rest, more breast. That would be awesome. More rest coming into that first game against Arizona, which they won in overtime. Then they faced New Jersey, and they didn't play well, and they lost by 2 to New Jersey. So now I think that sets up kind of a bounce-back spot where they stay at home. They don't really have anything on the horizon in their next game. They just face St. Louis, having to go out on the road. I think they're going to want to go 2-1 on this homestand here. So I think they're going to be motivated. They're coming off a pretty ugly loss against New Jersey. This game for Dallas is surrounded by much bigger opponents, so the game, I think, is a better focus spot for Nashville here, and they have a good team like Dallas coming into their house, coming off a loss. I think it's a bounce-back spot for Nashville, whereas for Dallas, I think they could overlook them somewhat easily here as they have bigger teams surrounding this game, so sandwich spot for Dallas, so I like Nashville at the underdog price, plus 115. And then in the other game, this line's moving way, way down already. I'm going to fade the Vancouver Canucks in what I think is a pretty classic bad spot in hockey. They're down from minus 201 to minus 178, though, so this line is really moving. The market is signaling against Vancouver pretty strongly here as this line continues to move down. They have 88% of the tickets because they are one of the best teams in hockey, record-wise at least, and only 54% of the cash, so a lot less of the cash is on Vancouver. It looks like the bigger money is moving the line towards Detroit significantly, so the line has dropped a lot. You can still get in on this Detroit around plus 160 or so. It's a pretty decent money line underdog here. So I like getting them as a fairly substantial underdog with a decent chance to win outright in this game because it is a bad spot for Vancouver, man. So coming out of the All-Star break, they have not been back home. They've played every game on the road so far, having to go to the East Coast as well. They've had a long road trip, a 5-game road trip. They went 3-2 on the road trip. Beat Carolina. They lost pretty ugly to Boston. Lost in overtime to Detroit. Won in overtime at Washington, and then won at Chicago to finish the road trip. They only have 1 day off coming back home. And yes, I did say they did lose in overtime to Detroit. But is that really going to have them totally focused here because they did lose to Detroit in the middle of the road trip? I'm not so sure about that, because when you return home and you have only 1 day off, it tends to be a distracted spot. As I always say, you have like family life to attend to. These guys haven't been back home since before the All-Star break, so they've had a long time away from home, so they're going to have stuff they need to get done at home. Even though they did just lose to Detroit, they might not be totally focused on the Detroit team that is kind of a mediocre team this year. And up next, they have a big game against Winnipeg, which is a bigger opponent. Winnipeg, one of the best records in hockey, so it's possible this is not only a return home distraction spot, but also a look-ahead spot for Vancouver here. So I think it is a bad spot for Vancouver. For Vancouver here with Winnipeg up on deck on Saturday. Even though Detroit just beat them, it's possible they overlooked Detroit a little bit there. And really, the road trip wasn't really that impressive, other than winning at Carolina. A win at Washington in overtime isn't very impressive, and a win at Chicago, not that impressive either. So I don't know what to take away from that road trip, really. And Detroit, they're kind of in a bounce back spot because they played 2 days ago, and even though, they beat Vancouver in the game before that, they're in the more rested spot, too, because they had 2 days off between Vancouver and Edmonton, so they've played fewer games in that same stretch. This is another one of these rest spots, just like the other game I just talked about, where since the All-Star break, Vancouver has played 5 games already, and Detroit has only played 2, so they're in the much better rest spot here. They had extra days off prior to facing Vancouver, which I think is what helped them get over the hump and beat Vancouver in that first game out of the All-Star break. Then they had 2 days off, and they went to Edmonton, and they lost. And maybe it was a letdown spot for Detroit coming off a big win over Vancouver, but I still thought maybe you'll be focused because it's Edmonton, so you don't really tend to be that unfocused really when it's a good team like Edmonton. But they went into Edmonton and they really seemed like they had nothing left in the tank after the overtime win over Vancouver, even though they had 2 weeks off and you'd expect them to still be focused on a pretty good Edmonton team. They went in, and not only did they lose, they lost in embarrassing fashion, 8-4. They allowed 8 goals in the game. That's just embarrassing, man. When you give up 8 goals, you're going to want to do something. Like, you need to turn something around here, man. And this looks like Detroit did not even have any penalties in this game. That makes no sense. Like, how could you lose a game 8-4 not even giving the other team any power plays, and you still lose 8-4? That's just insane. If you give up 8 goals to anybody, even if it is a good, high-scoring team like Edmonton, you're going to be in a bounce-back spot after that, and I think that is the case. That's an ugly, ugly loss for Detroit. They're going to want to turn it around here. Of course, they're going to be focused because it's the Vancouver Canucks that they're facing here. They actually have less travel right now than the Canucks do, too, because they've had fewer games back since the All-Star break, and they've only played 1 game on the road so far, and they're only traveling from Edmonton to Vancouver, whereas Vancouver's coming back from a road trip that took them all the way out to the East Coast, and then in that same stretch, they had to play in Washington and then Chicago. So they're coming back from the Midwest, while Detroit's already kind of been accustomed to the time zone shift, because Detroit's already been out there, at least in the mountain time zone for the other games. So Vancouver is going to have to travel across 1 extra time zone here coming into this game as well. So for all those reasons, I think it's a bad spot. I like Vancouver, so that's a packed card today, man. Packed slate. We got a ton of games today. Once again, run them all down. College basketball, a bunch of smaller conferences and stuff here. I'm getting wacko. I'm getting degenerate maybe, but I think all the spots are good. College basketball, East Carolina -1, Albany -7.5, UT-Arlington -5, and what was the other one here? Cal State Fullerton -2, NBA Utah Jazz +2, and NHL hockey, a couple underdogs here. Nashville +115, Nashville Predators, and Detroit Red Wings +160 as a pretty decent size underdog there. Let's have a good one, man. Let's start turning it around. I have to keep saying that because this has been a really, really horrific run, but I'm feeling it today, man. My boom mic, which is why I'm on my stupid phone here, going really low key, going ghetto today. My mic detached from the boom, and I think the boom basically is like busted. So I have a new one coming in, so that's not good. I'm gonna need to get that set back up. So hopefully, maybe that's an indicator that we'll turn around here. We have this ghetto video for today. Maybe it finally indicates that maybe we'll have a win today. Maybe it's a good sign. Let's do it. Peace.